If you guys hear me sniffling, I was just doing firewood outside and it's minus pain out there, but we're gonna get through it together. Hey guys, welcome back to Mainville ATV and Outdoors, where we do all things all-terrain. In this video, we are going to be doing a first impressions review of the brand new 2025 Gen 3 Outlander XMR. Everything that I think right now, and I think it'll be really interesting to do an early impressions in this video and a year from now when the deal is over with Can-Am to see how my opinion has changed in different terrains and with more seat time. So stay tuned. All right, first things first, a little bit of transparency because I think we need a little bit more of that in our world. This machine was given to me by Can-Am through Pete Sales and Service for 1 year. So yes, it was given to me for free. Yes, I am under contract, but no, I am under no obligation to say anything specific or do anything. They're not making me dance. They literally gave me the machine and said, do what you do best. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I am not shying away from cons. I am not shying away from saying what I really feel. I try to review things like a Joe Blow for the Joe Blow. So with that out of the way, let's get into the review. I don't even know if you guys can freaking see me. I'm a professional. All right, so first things first, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna tell you exactly what I think about this machine right away so you don't have to watch the rest of the video, because I know we live in a world of TikTok mindset, so I'm gonna do exactly that. Just do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe for me, stick around a while before I actually tell you what I think. I think at this price point, this is the best ATV on the market, period. It's not without its flaws, and we will get into that, but you can wrap it up here if you'd like and click your next video. Okay, we are going to start with a few fun facts. I think it'll paint a more clear picture knowing a few of these things as we move forward. So what you're looking at here, price point wise, is $19,799 MSRP online. Of course, that is subject to PDI, fees, local taxes, whatever you're going to be subjected to. So your out the door price is obviously going to be more than that. The next thing is, as you see it, minus my GoPro mount, it has been weighed with a full tank of fuel at 1,090 pounds. That is confirmed. There's video evidence of it all over the place online. That is what you can expect real world weight when you buy this machine out of the crate and take it on the trail. The next thing is, I believe it is the highest horsepower ATV ever produced off the factory line at 101 horse. So the new design 999cc engine, dual overhead cams, the whole shebang, puts it at 101 horse. It has been dynoed. I've seen a few sheets floating around with video evidence on these tires at the rear wheels. I have seen 71, 72, and 73 horsepower by the time you account for any power transfer loss. So those are some of the things that you kind of have to wrap your head around. This is a heavy machine, but it's also producing a ton of power. All right, so the intent of this video is to give you my first impressions because I think that's important. These are very early on impressions. I have taken this thing out for rides. I've used it around the property. I have a good idea of what's going on here. And then I want to compare it a year from now when I give this machine back with a final review to see if there was any honeymoon phase or some things that I didn't realize. Also, this machine actually got delivered in, the end of December, so I've only ever used it in snow and ice and everything else. Obviously, that's not the actual intended purpose of this machine. It's supposed to be in the mud. So some of this review is going to be based on only using it in the snow, and I need more time in the mud and the water and everything else where it's supposed to be before I give a final review. So we're going to get started. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the obvious thing to talk about, and it's plastics and chassis. We'll start with the plastics. They're both related, but the plastic design, you can tell that they have been paying attention for the last couple generations, and this leap is significant. It's significant not only on Can-Am's side of the things, but it's also, and more importantly, better for the consumer. What do I mean by that? Within seconds, you can have access to everything that you need to have access to get the job done, repair, to clean, to do whatever you want, right? It does not take long to tear this thing down all you want, right? So now we can clean rads, we can check oil, boost it, whatever you've got to do. Literal split seconds. These plastics not only fit well, but remove well. There's no funny process, there's no extra bits, no tools required. All of the basics can literally just snap off in a second. This tells me that they have been listening, watching, and paying attention to the consumer, and they made choices for the consumer. More of this comes off within a couple more seconds. And if you have to do any serious repairs, the rest of these plastics come off just like anything else. Get at anything we could ever need, check on something that we think that might have broke, whatever we got to do, it can now be done. So I mean, this plastics design is pretty sharp. Beyond the accessibility and serviceability and all that stuff, the fitment is crazy good. All right, so chassis. This one is probably one of the harder aspects to review this early on, so I'm going to give you exactly what I'm thinking first impressions. This thing has been redesigned from the ground up. I have lots of experience with the Gen 2 and Gen 1.5, I guess, platforms. I had an Outlander 1000r XMR, so back then for the Gen 2s it was a long frame. Slightly different than this, but they did update this from the ground up, so it's very, very different. I can tell you that the frame feels strong, it feels sturdy, the suspension feels much softer. So my original Outlander, when I had it and the Renegade, because they're essentially the same thing chassis-wise, they were very, very stiff, like horse wagon stiff. So with a little bit of tuning, you were good to go. That's no concern. For this machine, especially with the new rear A-arms and lack of trailing arms, this thing is like riding on cloud 9. And it's very good for the majority of the time. I found it a little soft in the corners, but just like the previous generation, a little tuning for the rider I think would go a long way. Obviously, Can-Am can't specifically tune this for every type of rider. You can have someone that's 300 pounds and you can have someone that's 100 pounds on this thing. So the difference between those people are obviously significant. The redesign feels good. First impressions are very good, so I guess I'll leave you with that. But there's a lot of question marks that I think I'll need some seat time in. And of course, I'm riding again in the winter where things are just rock hard. There's no give in the ground. Even when we went to a sand pit, it was literally like driving on, rock instead. So I do have some questions there, but overall impressions, very, very good. All right, so the next big subject is the power plant. Of course, they're using a Rotax 999cc dual overhead cam now, though. There are some significant differences. I am also going to pair clutching with this subject because the power delivery on this machine, 101 horsepower, 71 to 73 horse at the rear wheels, and the delivery, the relationship between those two things is phenomenal. Now, in most cases, again, because I'm riding in the winter, I don't have a whole lot of gription. So basically, when I would give it some juice, sport mode, I'm lighting up all fours most of the time. I did have a few stretches on the road where I got to feel some actual grip and see how the power worked out. I can tell you that the engagement and the power delivery all the way through the RPM, because trust me, I hit the top of the RPM, felt amazing. It's probably the most impressive part of this machine. So we're starting to see a theme of precision. That's kind of the word that I'm getting at the top of my mind when I'm talking about this machine. It's the P-drive clutch, so it's a one-piece. The secondary had some roller redesign and stuff like that. The honest truth is the aftermarket clutches, most people aren't going to want them anymore. I know there's still going to be the 1%ers, the racers, that kind of thing that want to mess around. I get it. But for Joe Blow like me, I don't think I'm going to touch these clutches other than some adjustment based on the way I want to ride. And that is great because now I'm not blowing, what, $3 grand, $3,500 on these clutches. And I love those clutches, but now I don't need them. So that's amazing. The engine itself, I'm going to need some more seat time, but it feels great. I cannot wait to see what this thing does in the long run. I know for a fact that there's going to be some pretty sweet tunes for this thing because that dual overhead cam really opens up some windows for a few extra horsepower. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that goes, but I can tell you right now that you can buy this out of the crate and you'll already be happy. There's going to be a lot less that you need to tweak. All right, so now we're going to talk about tires. We're going to talk a little bit about suspension and chassis because they kind of relate to what we're about to discuss. But what you're looking at are XPS Swamp King XLs. So this is Can-Am's tire. This is an unsquare setup. So you have a 9-inch front, a 10-inch rear width-wise. They're 30 inches tall. I measured them at 8 PSI and they come in at 29 1/4. So they're not quite 30 inches tall, true measurement. I'm not a fan of unsquare setups because you can't rotate them. In the back, when you have your 10-inch wides, if you're going down the trail in two-wheel and you like to drive spiritedly, like myself, you can have some premature wear on the back in the long run compared to the front. It's not the biggest deal when you're talking, it'll probably take me years to actually do that, but it can happen. And obviously you can't just swap them around. It's kind of weird and silly. So they obviously had to do that because of fitment. So I've seen a few videos online where people are putting 32s, but they are running into some fitment issues. A lot of that comes from turning, locking out, and actually having some suspension travel happen. You can hit some places in the front. I know one side's worse than the other, so you are going to have to find that perfect middle ground if you're looking to change out these tires. The tires themselves, again, I only rode them in the winter. They ran great. They ran exactly like I wanted to. They're very trailable. I had zero issues that way. They have more than enough lug to get the job done even in snow. So happy with that. I don't think any of these tires are going to blow anyone's minds. The design is proven. We've seen this V pattern in many tires, and I think Can-Am was smart to make one of their own. I think it's a great setup. There's nothing wrong with that. I brought up chassis because you're going to see bars and footwells and the design changes that they made for the chassis. They wanted some strength. You could tell that they were going for a very rigid frame, but it also means that some of those extra bars are in the way if you want to go big. So I suspect the aftermarket's going to do like a forward raked A-arm, like 2 inches like we've seen in the past, and that'll correct a lot of the things that I'm talking about. So if you're looking to go 32s and beyond, you're going to probably run into some modification. Personally, this is more than enough for me. I think this is great. I don't see any issues, especially with the high clearance on the chassis. You're actually going to do great with 30s anyway. One thing that did come up was the travel on an XTP. I believe it comes out to like 10.8 inches or 10.2 inches. And this exact same chassis, they had to put some sort of limitation on the travel in the front, and it comes out at 7.8 inches of travel. I suspect they had to do that again because of fitment issues with certain size tires. So I think they have like the perfect combination here right now, but they obviously had to limit some travel in order to fit them. So food for thought, things to think about. One of the other additions that I love is they actually installed four-wheel, four-corner braking. In the previous generation, they had 3, and only one side of the rear had a brake. Ultimately, not a big deal. The only thing that I didn't like is when you were water wheeling or wheeling in general, and you would tap the brake, it would actually turn you on the brake side. So that ran me into a few things, but eventually you get good at understanding that that was going to happen, and you can kind of make up for it. But I am glad to see four-wheel disc brakes, and that's one of the better additions, honestly. I know it sounds silly, but it's something that I really appreciate. And I can tell you that they're super sticky. I don't know if it's because they're new, but I ran into no sponginess. They felt great, and they lock up in a hurry. So I got pretty good at like one finger riding them, and especially in the winter, you got to be careful. You got to be on the brake pretty quick, but they operated great. I have no problem with that. I'm glad to see four-corner braking. Every generation tends to have a point of contention on something new visually. One of the things that came up in the 2.5 generation, I'll call it, it's when they did a facelift on the Renegades and Outlanders, I think in 23. They came out with this headlight. They even had it on the Skidoo and everything for the Gen 5s up there. I remember there was a whole crowd that was, oh, I don't really like those. And I was actually part of those people. And I even went out of my way to buy a 22 Renegade with the round headlights because I liked them so much. Since then, I've totally come around to the headlights, and a lot of people have, especially with the new design. It makes a lot of sense. Everything's very modern, and I'm really happy to see it now. But the point of contention on this machine specifically, the XMR, is this bumper. On all of the other machines with this chassis, the Gen 3 chassis, this winch is actually down below inside where you would typically see it. They decided for the XMR that they were going to do this bumper and just run the winch nice up and high. I have no problem with this. I can see very few actual cons, but people did bring up a few points that I do like. Some people would say, well, I'm going to run into the glass, and I'm worried about the glass in the back of my truck when I load it in there. What I can say to those people is it doesn't really matter what bumper you have here. If you're going to hit your glass, well, you're going to hit your glass. But I feel there is some extra length here. One of the other ones, and this one I do agree with, I'd like to see a bumper option that actually covers your headlights, like a brush guard or something. So if they had another option with just some bars like they've done in the past, that'd be cool. One of the other things that I've seen, and you can actually do this, is you can just take this winch and mount it where it goes down below. No problem. The wiring will reach the whole 9 yards, and you can just mount it there if you'd like. And you can swap this bumper out with the XTP bumper. No problem. It all mounts in the exact same place. So, you know, it'd be nice to have that option from the get-go when you're ordering it, but if you want to do it after the fact, Can-Am has all of the right components to switch that up if you'd like. All right, so this next part is going to be my pros and cons. So this is what I'm going to reflect on a year from now when I do my final review. I'm going to look back on this first impression, how I felt now or then, and how it compares to the future. So we're going to start with our pros list. My first pro is you don't have to fix anything on this machine. There's a segment of the market, I'm going to call it the 5%, not the 1%, but the 5%, that would buy a machine and they would immediately know that they want to blow a bunch of money on clutches, go get certain tires, go get whatever, snorkel extensions, that kind of thing. This machine, in my opinion, you buy it out of the crate, you're good to go. This is going to solve the problem for 99% of the people that this machine was designed for. You're not going to need to tweak a whole lot. There's going to be some preferences, some rider changes, that kind of thing, like I touched on. You could be 3 times the weight as another rider, and that could change how you might want to tune this machine. There can be a preference on how you want your clutch to engage, etc., etc. So there are some things that you can manipulate, but you've already got most of the problems solved. They've obviously paid attention to what people are doing to their machines, and they just wanted to solve most of it in-house. That's something that I appreciate more than anything. The next thing I want to touch on is power delivery. So from clutch engagement to full RPM, my first impression of this is wild. It feels incredible. The precision, how tight it feels, doesn't feel clunky. There's no gaps. There's no sudden surge in power. It's very equal the whole way up, and it just freight trains when I was riding it. So I'm very happy with the way it delivers all 101 horsepower. My next pro is serviceability. And the way I look at it is I'm more concerned with how I can service, diagnose, repair on the trail than I am in the shop. Let's be real. Anyone can tear these down and start getting to work on it in the shop. You run into a few hurdles, it's not a big deal when you're warm and you have access to all your tools. I'm more concerned with what I can do on the side of the trail. Can I get to my belt easily? Can I check the oil? Can I check whatever I need to check? Can I do it on the trail? And I think this machine supplies the most options I've seen to date in an ATV. So my next pro is when it comes to ATVs and UTVs, it really feels like, in especially the last 10 or so years, that ATVs have mostly been neglected. When you take a look at the market and you chase the dollars, I don't blame a company for focusing on UTVs, but Can-Am obviously hasn't forgotten about the ATV market. Not only are they coming out with, top end models like this, but they're also coming out with budget friendly options as well. So they're the only brand that's covering all bases, the whole spectrum of ATV needs. And whereas some brands aren't even touching it all anymore, they're kind of just reproducing the same thing over and over. So I appreciate that Can-Am hasn't forgotten us ATV folks. My next pro is Can-Am is paying attention to the rider and what the rider wants. They're not just sitting in this design room coming up with what they think will sell best. There's a bunch of choices on here, from hooked handlebars to foot grips for wheelies to access to your rad. These are all things that obviously came from people who actually ride. So Can-Am is listening and actually integrating those thoughts into their design choices. So that's something I really appreciate about a big company like Can-Am. They're actually paying attention to the people who are using their products and making their products better. So you gotta like that. All right, so my last big pro is they finally addressed the gearbox shifting. This is the smoothest shifting Can-Am out there. There is no other model shifting as nice as these Outlanders right now. And I don't know what exactly they did, what voodoo magic they dug into, but they've got it figured out. That being said, it is still a thing that you have to Can-Am rock it sometimes if you're on a hill or depending how you parked in order to get it to start again. All right, it's time for my cons. Some of these you might say are nitpicky. Some of these you might find a big deal. That's up to you. There are a few things that I dislike about this machine. Number one, as you see it out of the crate, the way it comes, there's actually nowhere to store anything but your cell phone. I'm aware that there is a lot of options for storage that you can purchase. They have a ton of great stuff with their link setups. But when you buy the machine, there isn't even a spot to put an extra pair of gloves. So that's my first con. My next con is the limited travel. We know that the XTP has 10.8 inches, I believe, and this model comes with 7.5. I think the only reason why they had to put that limitation is tire size. It would be nice to see that travel come back, because a little over 10 inches is pretty normal on ATVs, and I'd like to see that in this machine as well, so maybe we can come up with something for that. That being said, with how plush this thing rides, how comfortable this thing rides, and I never bottomed it out, I don't suppose there's an actual issue, but I would like to see that front end travel come back. My next con is that this doesn't come with bead locks. We have seen many models that Can-Am's come out with, they would include a bead lock. For some reason, the Outlanders never get a bead lock unless it's like an XTP or something like that. We know who's buying these machines and what they want to do with it, and they're going to ride fairly aggressively, especially when you're coming into mud and ruts and stuff like that. A bead lock would have been a nice option to have, even if it was something that's upgradable, that kind of thing. But this machine does not come with a bead lock. So my next con is the tires, not the tire design or anything like that. I think the tires work great. My issue is the unsquare setup. I don't like that, you know, especially if I'm riding in two-wheel like I spoke about earlier, I could wear down those lugs, and then if you rotate them, things get weird. They obviously went with a 9-inch wide in the front to leave a little more room. I would even appreciate if they did a 9-inch in the rear instead of the 10-inch. I think it would be a lot better to just have 9s all the way around, and then we could just rotate them and be good to go. Get a little more longevity out of the tires that way. So there you have it, guys. That is my initial thoughts, some of my pros and cons, some of the things that are kind of revolving around my head as I enjoy this thing. What I can tell you, this is the best bang for buck if this is the category of ATV you're looking for. It's a few dollars, but the people who are buying this are buying it for a reason. Out of the crate, it's basically sorted out. You don't have to do a whole lot, and you'll enjoy this for years. It is unreal. It is precise. The power feels incredible. It is everything that an ATV should be in 2025. As for the cons and the things that I dislike about this machine, some of them are personal preference. Some of them are, would like to seize. A lot of them can be sorted out very easily and quickly, even right at Can-Am, no problem. So yeah, some minor gripes, but not a big deal whatsoever. I can't wait to spend the rest of this year with this machine. I want to thank Can-Am and Pete Sales and Service again for providing it. I'm going to make sure I put it to good use, and I get to show you guys everything you need to know about it this year. All right, guys, that is the end of our first impressions video. If you liked it, make sure to hit that button and subscribe if you want to stick around a while. There's a join button if you want to support us for the price of a coffee all the way to a Big Mac. You can directly change and influence this channel. I'm going to put some serious miles and get some use out of it this year, and then do that final review and see how it compares to this. I think that'll be an interesting little experiment. Very impressed by this machine. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll make sure to answer them to the best of my ability, and we will see you guys next time.